Coffee is one of those small pleasures that people are very reluctant to give up.
This episode of the Ingredients Podcast is brought to you by Tanda, helping the best venues stay ahead. So if you run an awesome venue, but you want to be compliant at the same time, make sure you reach out to the Tanda team at hospitality@tanda.com.au. Welcome to this episode of the Ingredients Podcast. And today we're sitting in St. Ali in South Melbourne, talking with Lachlan Ward, the CEO of St. Ali. Now today we talk about everything around supply chain in the world markets right now, how they're expanding into Asia, and how they keep a brand bold for the last 20 years in the Melbourne market. We hope you enjoy this podcast. Lachlan, welcome to the Ingredients Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hosting us here
My
in
pleasure.
St. Ali. This is the OG site.
It is, yeah, this is still the heart of the business and sort of where I spend a lot of my time day to day. I think, the business has obviously taken, has been on a journey since this place opened some 20 years ago, but, it is still very much the beating heart of the business.
I imagine just working here, because I know your offices are upstairs, right? Like, you must just have energy just coming into this space when probably sometimes running a coffee brand like you do zaps a lot of energy, I'm sure.
For sure. I mean, I think that's what probably makes the venue itself very special too. I think it's a hard thing to put your finger on when you talk about a venue having energy. Like, I think, you're in hospo, right? So you walk into a space and you feel like that sort of X factor, and this place always has had that somehow. But I think it's energizing. Like, a day like today, it's, during the Australian Open, you've got the international tourists, you've got locals from the office down the street. Like, it's this eclectic mix any day of the year that sort of makes it fun.
How are you feeling about coffee as an industry right now? Like, I know it's ebbed and flowed a lot in the last couple of years. We've had coffee prices which have exploded worldwide due to many different reasons, but how are you feeling about the industry right now?
Even with all those things, it's still an exciting time to be in coffee. I think when things get tough, or when life gets complicated, or when you start to have to think about what you've got to prioritize, and the cost of living and everything like that, I think coffee is one of those small pleasures that people are very reluctant to give up. So I think coffee's definitely got challenges, and we're finding our way through it. But the beautiful thing about coffee is it's habitual. It does have that addictive element, and it is an affordable luxury for people. So I think it's a challenging time, but I think if you're focused on what makes you or the brand special, I think there's still very much a place for coffee.
What do you think makes St. Ali special?
It's an interesting question, and it's probably a hard thing to pin down, in one sort of clean and simple sentence. I think, St. Ali from the very beginning looked at things slightly different to most coffee brands. I think coffee attracts product people. We get into coffee because it's a craft industry. You love the product, you love the story of provenance, you love the craft along the way. But coffee is like a vehicle for so many things. And I think, Sal, the founder of the business in its current form, probably recognized that very early on. And so used coffee as a vehicle to stretch the business in like a whole heap of different directions that most coffee brands probably had never thought to do or have done. So collaborations or pop-ups or, all of those things. From the very beginning, and that's sort of been baked into the DNA of the business. So that sort of creativity and that sort of thinking big in a craft business is probably how I'd distill it in a really simple form, and how we've managed to, I guess, stay relevant, stay special, and continue to grow, some 20 years later.
Is it sometimes tough being as bold as what St. Ali is in a market like Melbourne, which is so known for third wave coffee and so much about muted tones and that kind of stuff that's happened the last probably decade in coffee?
I think, look, to be really fair, of course, you've always got to look over the fence at what your neighbours are doing and, make sure that, or keep yourself accountable. But, we've always sort of marched the beat of our own drum, and, we're passionate about creativity and design, and, have always been very much a design-led business. And, people buy with their eyes, and, I think taking risks and differentiating, physically and as a brand, I think is a powerful way to stand out in a really crowded market. So, yeah, no, I think, yeah, I mean, we're really lucky here in Melbourne. We've got some amazing coffee brands that, we happen to be, sit alongside and be a part of. And, but, we're always going to do things our way.
Sure.
Yeah.
How are you expanding the business now? Like, why is there not 10 sites, cafes in Melbourne?
Yeah, good question. I think, look, I've been in the business for 15 years and, I've seen us, at our peak, we had sort of 12, 13 sites across a couple of different brands. And we've ebbed and flowed, smaller and larger, or smaller since then. Hospitality within our business is always going to be fundamental and is like our guiding star and value. But whereas in the early days it was the business, like it was, the bread and butter, and it was the main driver of cash and earnings and all the, boring business stuff. Today it sort of plays a slightly different role, and it's, we talk, borrowing Howard Schultz's sort of phrase, like we talk about cups in hands being a really powerful way to drive brand. And so our stores, particularly this one in South Melbourne, are really act as that for us. So it's about introducing the brand and the coffee and the products to people in the most organic, honest, best way possible. So still really relevant. Will you see us opening more stores in Melbourne anytime soon? No, I think, that doesn't really fit with our strategy. But will you see us opening stores, I guess domestically in other cities and states for sure? And, looking at, I guess, the next frontier of coffee too. I think, Melbourne's a very mature coffee market and has some amazing brands, and, the consumers are very sophisticated here. But there's like so many parts of the world that are, at a much earlier part of the curve than we are. And so, we've always been passionate about bringing what we do to more people and, making it accessible for everyone. So looking at regions like Asia or the Middle East and interestingly parts of South Asia like India, there's such a massive enthusiasm and appetite for what we do. And, you only have to travel to those cities. And when we've done a bunch of pop-ups and been a part of, different trade shows and stuff over the last few years, and the response you get reminds me very much of early days specialty coffee here, where lines out the door, people buying the most expensive and everything hand over fist. It's really exciting to be a part of. So I think hospitality, like I said, guiding star for us, but maybe not so much in Melbourne.
Why do you think the St. Ali brand does resonate in parts of Asia when you're not? I don't think you're rebranding or changing anything around the brand, right? Why is that working in other markets?
It's a global world, connected world, right? So, we benefit from a lot of, I guess, coffee tourists and just tourists in general. And, we've built a brand that is sort of synonymous with Melbourne or Australian coffee and sort of cafe culture. So I think there is that recognition and sort of hype, I suppose, when we open in these new markets. We're not too proud to localize parts of the menu though. I think, when we opened our first Manila store, there's been learnings for absolutely. I'll give you an example. When we opened in Manila, the guys came to me with hey, look, this is the menu. Instead of eggs on toast, we're going to do eggs on rice. And I was like, nah, come on. We're an Aussie brunch cafe. We can't just ditch bread. That's just not going to happen. And so we opened and, whatever. And 3 months later, listen, this isn't working. We need to change things up. So we introduced, more rice dishes. We changed it to, build your own eggs on rice dish. And it was black and white. It was change almost overnight. So I think, identifying the things that are core, is key. And, localizing, the right bits and pieces. But coffee's like an international language, right? I think there's always going to be slight differences, but that's what is one of the things that makes coffee special and such a great industry to be part of.
Yeah. Do you think people naturally will have the same sort of coffee taste or coffee profile in other parts of Asia, or have you noticed that it is remarkably different?
Look, like I said, there are different stages of the curve and those different countries have all had different influences along the way too, right? So I think they've got a different starting point, and that's, I think, country specific. If I had to make some generalizations, they are starting from a quite traditional sort of dark roast or super concentrated instant style of coffee as their historical way that it's been consumed. So there is that journey to be on, but what the segments of the market that we sell to, or the people that come and see us in our cafes, tend to be, sort of mobile middle class people with disposable income, right? That have had exposure to our style of coffee before. So while there is some education, it's not, completely new to them.
Do you think you'll, in those outer Asian markets, do you think you'll do different kind of retail products, given that I think in those kind of markets as well, instant is becoming even more heavy in usage and that kind of stuff?
Look,
or do you think you'll always be espresso?
Look, we've never been afraid to look at new formats. I think great coffee is great coffee, and who are we to judge or preach to people on how it should be consumed? I think there's certain parts of the coffee industry that are very sort of self-righteous and high and mighty about how and where and why it should be drunk, and how it should be treated and all that kind of stuff. And that, I think, in some respects can be good, but it's hospitality at the end of the day, and we want to give people the coffee the way they want to, and we want to get the coffee to the people in the way that they want to consume it. So whether that's in an instant format or a concentrate or something like that, we'd look at it. I think it's got to be fundamentally a good product though. We're not going to make instant for instant's sake. It's got to be delicious, and we would need to back it. But I mean, we've looked at instant plenty of times.
Yeah, right.
We've looked at mixers before. I think that's again one of the cool things about coffee. It can be consumed so many different ways. So
how have you had to change your sourcing for coffee over the last couple of years as we've had these constraints around climate change and that kind of stuff?
It's been a challenging time, in a number of different ways. We, as a sort of larger coffee business, we're sort of buying futures, so we're sort of committing to our volume in advance, some 12 or 18 months, in sort of easier times, where we can't quite do that in 2026. But look, I think one of the key things we've had to do and continue to do is look at diversifying supply chains. So, we've historically bought a lot of coffee, particularly blend coffees, out of places like Colombia and Brazil, for a number of reasons. But we're looking closer to home in some of those emerging producing nations. India, we're buying coffee from China, so we'll have we've just bought a year's worth of coffee out of China for one of our key blending key blending coffees. Buying coffees out of the Philippines, Timor, New Guinea. So I think looking to diversify away from some of those traditionals, and also it just feels good to support new origins as well. I think the qualities are becoming much better, and the food miles are better, and all that kind of thing as well. So, but look, the complexity is not coming away from coffee. It's been a really tough time, for 100 different reasons, and there's been endless amounts of press on coffee pricing and stuff like that.
Yes.
But I don't think some of that complexity is going anywhere. I think it's the new normal, and prices may become more stable in the next sort of 12 to 18 months, depending on how these next harvests go. But I don't think it's going back to where it was quite, benign for, a long time.
Sure. Does it take a long time to actually test if a coffee will be a coffee that you guys will use? How many people are part of that process at St. Ali?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that we've always stood by is, retaining that craft approach to how we do things, even as we've scaled. So, we've got 3 people on the quality team. We have a food scientist that's employed full time that works both within the coffee products themselves and also the development of some of those adjacent products as well. and then the roasting team's part of that. So if you add them all together, there's probably 8 people that are across that process. Most of our like core products, like the blends, which still make up a large part of the business, they're relationship coffees that have been built over a long time. So, I mean, those aren't static, like you always got to work at them and calibrate and all that kind of thing, because people move on and that kind of stuff. But I mean, coffee's organic product. It changes every I don't want to say every minute, but it's never the same harvest to harvest or month to month. So it's just a constant piece of work.
How are you feeling about other beverages that support coffee with inside the cafes? Like we've seen, matcha have a moment that is still continuing to go on, but those kind of premium beverages coming through, like how are you seeing that evolve in the business?
I mean, look, it's a massive part of our business today. I mean, I remember it was the first trip we did out of COVID. We went to Seoul, and at the time, I'd been stuck in Melbourne for, best part of 2 years or whatever. And, I think, it was just human nature that you became very like isolated and like we're the center of the universe and all that kind of stuff. And, flying over there and seeing what they were doing in coffee with some of those like signature beverages, I guess you'd call them, blew my mind. And, we got back from that trip like, no, we need to do this. This is the future of how people are consuming coffee and sort of cafe drinks. I think it's great. I mean, the consumers are looking for customization. They're looking for experiential beverages or food items. And these products tick those boxes. I think they also allow operators to, have a higher price point items on their menu as well. I don't think, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't have a copy of the menu here, but I mean, we have a 2-page spread dedicated just to those beverages.
Wow.
And, there's probably 2 or 3 on the menu that outsell most core coffee products on a dollar and number basis. So, it's real and it's here to stay. And, we're developing sort of take-home products that enable people to do some of those things in their home too, because that's just how people are consuming today.
Is it hard to train a barista in this day and age?
It's a good question. Look, I think we've always been, we'll try to be like a paint by numbers, objective approach to training and looking at coffee. So when you take away some of the emotion around it, I mean, obviously it's an organic product and taste is king, but when you ground it in sort of measurable parameters, I think you take away a lot of that human element or like the variability, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's like anything. It comes down to attitude more than aptitude, right? I think, the easiest baristas to train are probably those who haven't had habits form, and it's probably not much different to other, spheres of life, right? But no, we're really lucky. Like, we're one of the organizations within coffee that, have some mobility for staff. We're a larger business, so people can move up or sideways or benefit from some of the supporting structure we have in the business, be a part of, tastings on a weekly basis, get support for competitions, move into head office. We've got, it's the nature of hospitality, right? You have people who travel who, maybe from somewhere that they've got a tertiary education. Like we've got someone who is running our cafe who is has a degree in computer science. She's just moved into running our CX, like customer experience division within our e-commerce business. There's always, there's always going to be challenges, but I think there's bigger challenges.
As a CEO, how do you balance your time amongst the hospitality brand, the retail brand, the wholesale brand, the e-com brand? How do you balance that?
Yeah, look, as you say, like there's the shape of the business has absolutely changed along the journey, and they're all interrelated and all really important for different reasons. So I think the key thing though is, we started as a people business and we remain as much. And I think even though we have, 150, around 150 staff, maybe slightly over, I think it's still really important to have physical connection with the business and the people every day. So I'm in here a lot. Walk the floor in the warehouse every day, speak to the sales team, even though I might not have to, just to have a chat. I think that sort of is how I stay on the heartbeat of the business. I think being nimble and agile, I think, is critical even as you grow. So I think just hearing it from the front lines, I think, is most important. But yeah, it's just, I think it's just making sure each area of the business gets the love and attention that it needs. And, that looks and feels different. And, we don't get everything right. I'm still learning every day and, having a lot of fun. So, yeah, but it's, I guess, just remaining cognizant and focused on what's got us here and what's going to get us to the next step. Yeah.
As a leader, how do you remain excited and energized and not burnt out in a brand like St. Ali, because it is a big brand and so many moving parts, especially after 15 years, right? That's a long time.
I think it is a long time, but, in a lot of ways we're just beginning. Like, the business has remained, has been very focused very focused on being like a Melbourne coffee brand, or, very focused on Melbourne and our immediate market for a long time. And, we're only really just seeing, or only really on the tip of the iceberg on what other opportunities lay outside of Victoria. We're really focused on growing the brand interstate and internationally. And Melbourne or Victoria or Australia generally is a small market relative to the rest of the world. So I'm still super energized to take St. Ali, to its full potential. And I think that is as a genuine global coffee brand. I think we are global in certain circles, within, I guess, our part of coffee. But I think there's space there for a brand like ours to be a global player.
Do you think it's important to have flagships like this in those new markets in order to be that beacon of the brand rather than just going in and trying to do a wholesale and retail environment?
For sure. I think, this venue, we've done plenty of venues across, different formats and brands, but this venue has been and remains, the biggest point of referral, and I guess our most successful salesperson in the business.
Sure.
It's an experience that people refer back to. It's an experience hospitality operators look at and want to bring to their own site. So I think, having that physical touch point is critical. And so that's how we look at new markets. It's like, okay, so it's a hospitality-led strategy. And that's going to look and feel different, depending on the market. And, what comes after that hospitality site is going to be different, depending on the opportunities and the complexities. But yeah, it's how we look at new markets, for sure.
When a new venue, whether it be a cafe or a bakery or whatnot, comes to you and says, we're completely new and completely fresh, we want to have St. Ali coffee.
Yeah.
How do you pick them as a customer, and what do you do to support them in that transition?
Being around hospitality and coffee for a long time, and as a lot of our team have done as well, I think, you recognize pretty early on the people that align with your values and are going to give it a really red hot go and do right by your brand and do a great job with whatever they're doing. So I think there's always going to be that soft human element that you do need to take a gamble on, so, you're going to get it wrong sometimes, they're going to get it wrong sometimes, because hospitality is hard. Even the good operators fail. We've had plenty of crap sites, right? So how do we support them? I think, we have a lot of experience doing this ourselves, right? So I think first and foremost, you're partnering with a coffee roaster, but also a business that's been there and done that and continues to push the envelope within their own hospitality business, day to day. So we've got that expertise. You're working with a brand that you can grow with too. Where although we are bigger, I think bigger can be better in some ways. If you're working with a roaster and you're looking to I guess help maybe potentially leverage their brand to get people through your door, and I think we're a good choice for that reason. Things like being in grocery have actually been really beneficial for our wholesale customers in the long term. So I think, I think those are probably the main things. But also, we're just good people. Like, I mean, it's like I said before, we're still very much a craft business that has managed to scale somehow. And our people in the business are still motivated and love coffee and love what they do. So, yeah.
Is there part of Australia that you're sort of doubling down on, that you think there's going to be some growth opportunities by way of wholesale and retail in the next 12 months?
Yeah, look, I mean, I am slightly biased because I grew up that way, but I think Queensland and Southeast Queensland in particular is quite buoyant at the moment. There's a lot of investment, going in around the Olympics. Lots of people moved there from places like Melbourne and Sydney during the dark days of COVID. And I think, talking back to like that sort of curve in the coffee journey, I think there's maybe slightly, I don't want to upset any Queensland listeners, but perhaps potentially behind like some of the southern states. So I think there's amazing opportunities up there. So we're really looking at that intently. But, we still have so much opportunity within like the New South Wales, in particular Sydney market. It's a bigger market than Melbourne, and we're, a fraction of the size up there that we are here. So looking at that and, recognising we've been very close to having brick and mortar there for a long time on a number of occasions, and just hasn't happened. So that's one of the areas of focus in the next 12 months, is how do we get that beacon in Sydney.
Final question to you. What's the smallest operational change you've made in the business which has created the biggest impact?
Well, I mean, recently I can think of one that doesn't sound like much, but we moved, this might be boring for some people, we moved our maximum roast date on the floor from 7 days post-roast to 9.
Okay.
And which doesn't sound like much. And for most people, that's not going to mean much, but it's meant that our roasters can now plan their roast scheduling much more effectively.
Right.
And we can spread out our planning throughout the week. So, they had held up this 7-day rule for a long time, and, it's there for a reason. Like, we're roasting to order more or less, but whether it's 7 or 9 days, that tiny increment isn't going to change anything for the end user, right? Which is the guiding star. And so that's changed a lot. I mean, there's been plenty of things along the way. I mean, that's what comes to mind straight away.
It's a great one.
Because Chris, the head roaster, thanks me for it. And I wish I could substantiate exactly what the flow ons are, but that small change has definitely, freed up some headaches in there.
Lachlan, it was great to have a chat with you again.
My pleasure.
Especially at this time of the business where it's just going from strength to strength, going to Asia. And thanks for joining us on the podcast.
It's been great to be here.
Awesome.
Question. Because the brand has so many different arms to it,
Yeah.
other than just cafe, obviously, like wholesale and your international.
Yeah.
Have you found it hard to find someone to offload it off with? To be like,
Oh, that's a good
what's
question.
getting beyond me?
Yeah,
Have
for
you
sure.
had someone else, or have you been lucky enough that someone's kind of come into, like you said, the brand that fits the role?
Oh, look, I think at an earlier time in the business, like, we have been really lucky that like people like me have been able to like grow with the business and like do different things. But you're right, like, it is becoming more complex and requiring more specific skill sets. So we've had to, like, I'm hiring a lot more out of coffee now. So, the people running the brand side or e-commerce in particular, those skill sets don't really exist in coffee.
Yeah.
So we've had to go elsewhere. And I think that's like been the biggest step change and has allowed us to level up really quickly. And of course, you still want to give people opportunities in the business, and we will do that. But, when I'm looking at someone to lead e-commerce with the size of the business it is today, they're not going to probably be coming out of the cafe, right?
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, you go into the kitchen today and like, they're like accountants, lawyers, like it's hilarious. Like, like really bright people, and not to say chefs are. That's not my point. I'm just saying like they've come from different walks of life and have come back because they want to be in coffee or in food.
Yeah.
Our head of education's an electrical engineer.
Oh wow.
He was with Sony for a long time. And, he could be earning $1 trillion more doing that.
Yeah.
But, is in coffee. Like
Wow.
it's it's a cool industry.
Yeah. This episode of the Ingredients Podcast is brought to you by Tanda, helping the best venues stay ahead. So if you run an awesome venue, but you want to be compliant at the same time, make sure you reach out to the Tanda team at hospitality@tanda.com.au.